So America doesn't have a worker shortage, it has a work shortage. So says the founder of America's Work, who penned an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal arguing that it's time to take action to get able-bodied Americans off the couch. As many this year as 94.9 million Americans, in fact, are not currently in the workforce. And that doesn't include those who may not want a job, like students and retirees. And almost 128 million people were either unemployed, part-time employed, or just simply not in the labor force. And this number represents nearly 50% of working-aged Americans. Also, a new study from the National Bureau of Economic Research suggests that male 20-year-olds more interested in leveling up the digital world than really grinding it out in the real one. Joining me now to discuss, Tammy Bruce and Tim Phillips. Tim, let's start first with the idea that some are saying, I've said it for a long time, but there's a loud chorus now saying, hey, we're paying people too much money and they won't go to work. We're paying people actually not to work, particularly young, able-bodied men.
Now, we've had states, some states are taking the lead and requiring work for welfare benefits. That's a good idea. The welfare reforms in the late 1990s that Clinton and the Gingrich House did have been watered down aggressively during the Obama years. It is a deeply troubling statistic that you lay out. The workforce participation, the lowest since the Carter years, in the depth of the late 70s. And one of the numbers that's worth pointing out, Charles, millennials, 18 to 34, Bureau of Labor Statistics say that a third of them now live at home.
Yeah, and Tammy, it's not going to get better, I don't think. I mean, we've seen rampant abuse of all these systems become easier, particularly over the last 8 years when President Obama actually was encouraging people to get on welfare, encouraging people to seek out one of these transfer payment programs and get on there. Many of them got on there and they're staying. Right,
exactly. And when he came into office, one of the things he did was reverse the work requirement effectively, which is just making it easier to just be on welfare. As a matter of fact, when we had that reform, the number of people using it went down by about 60%. It was a huge drop. And under Obama, as a result, though, it ballooned. And so the messaging was, look, this is the new normal. It's either going to be 2 part-time jobs. You're never really going to have a career. This has been for half a generation now. Forget about having a career workplace. It can be very different. And of course, that's depressing. It's not appealing. And then you begin to think, well, you know, maybe this world's not made for what I can do. And maybe you don't even know what you can do. You know, what you've studied poetry. I suppose you got a degree in poetry from college, or women's studies. I mean, we've got an entire generation now that really have not been guided. They've been abandoned by not necessarily the mechanism of government, because we don't like big government, but the messages that come from leadership. And this is something we saw Clinton change it very, very quickly with work for welfare. And of course, George W. Bush continued that with reform, and it worked, and it can work again.
It had immediate dividends.
Yeah.
Real quick, I'm not sure you're familiar with the grass eater phenomenon in Japan, but this began about 12 years ago, where these young men said, I don't want to do what my dad did. I don't want to take a train 2 hours to work and 2 hours home, and I don't want to work for the same company for 50 years. They all gravitated to the basement, started playing video games to the point where Japan's population is in reverse, and it's a national tragedy. And we have something akin to that happening here. The amount of time our young men have stopped working and are spending on leisure, like playing video games, Tim, this is something that goes beyond even government. This is a cultural phenomenon.
It is, and too many Americans, I think, are losing faith in the American dream. They can go out and through hard work and aspirational, hope and make their lives and hopes and dreams come true. And it's something that sometimes happens when they look at Washington, D.C. They see a rigged economy too often where the elites do well. But a lot of it is cultural, with I think, the video culture, which is not a healthy thing.
Yeah, it's not. All right.
I would argue, though, that it's artificial. I think we can come right back if there is an actual messaging from the government that this American dream, the future is back. And Reagan managed to do it, and I think that we can do it again. It's not an American sensibility to give up.
We're certainly at a very, it's almost identical, though, to when Reagan came in and he had to turn this thing around, because the whole confidence thing was plunging. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
You bet.